Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome the CEO of Singer Publicity, which is a book marketing agency, and she's also a fellow New Yorker. Please help me welcome Yehudit Singer-Freud. Yehudit, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
We have a lot to cover, but start by going back a little bit with you. So you're from New York originally. So where around?
I grew up on Long Island in
Which
Suffolk
part?
County.
Suffolk County? Okay.
Yes.
I lived in Long Island for a little bit at one point.
Yeah, I'm from a small town in Suffolk County, right on the border between Nassau and Suffolk, called East Northport, Huntington.
I know that very well. Yes. Okay. So were you from an observant family?
No, not at first. Growing up, I was, born into a Jewish family, and I guess we were, somewhat traditional. We went to a conservative synagogue when I was growing up, and I went to Hebrew school. My parents always raised me to be a proud Jew.
Yeah.
And I was in public school until 8th grade. And what happened was, for a variety of reasons, we started going to the local Orthodox synagogue, which was about 4 miles away from where we lived. And little by little.
What prompted your family to do that? All of a sudden.
I think they had a few friends in the conservative synagogue that started going to this other synagogue. That's such a Jewish thing to do. We go to the other synagogue, and we just heard really nice things about the community there and about the rabbi there, and so we started going. And this was I must have been in like 6th or 7th grade. And NCSY was pretty active there, and I started getting involved with NCSY, and there were a few kids who were my age, and little by little, I started getting more and more observant. And
you did this as a kid. Your family started getting observant as you were a kid?
Yes, I was probably 12 or 13.
Wow. Okay.
And little by little, it was kind of like a Kirov community. It was this small Kirov community out in this little town. And there were a handful of us who eventually we started keeping Shabbat. We started walking to shul on Shabbat morning. I started going to yeshiva for high school. And, as with a lot of Kirov families, eventually you move out and you want to go to a more religious area. So after a while, I came here and I made Aliyah. I came to seminary.
Oh, we'll get to that. I'm definitely going to get to that.
Yeah. So eventually we all became observant, basically.
Because we were never really observant. We followed. We were traditional and everything. We kept kosher in the house. But I remember also the time that my mom pulled me out of public school to go to yeshiva, because she wanted much more of a Jewish education. And we still weren't religious, but I remember that was one of the goals, to become, find out much more about it and, just have that Jewish upbringing kind of thing.
Yeah. So for me, it was one of my goals, but it wasn't necessarily what my parents wanted at the time.
So it was more you than your parents?
The school district.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I was just, basically I was the only, by the time I was in 8th grade in public school, I was keeping Shabbat. I was keeping kosher, and I was the only one there. So, and it was a really good school district. So now looking back, I realized my parents really sacrificed a lot to send me to yeshiva. It was expensive.
Sure.
So
like my daughters actually went to seminary, both of them. One's there now, and the oldest went a few years ago. And my oldest came back much more religious than I ever was. So it's yes, it's some getting used to. But
that's an occupational hazard.
Right. So considering what you do now, were you always a big reader growing up? Were you always into books a lot?
Yeah, I always liked to read, and I always liked to write. I still have a whole collection of my journals and diaries from back then.
You
I
like write fiction as well?
wouldn't dare open them. Sorry?
Did you write fiction as well?
No, no, just my own, my own thoughts.
Okay.
But I
And
was always very into that.
what type of books were your favorite? Which were some of your favorite books?
Um, I mean, even still, my favorite genre is memoirs, biographies. I
Hmm.
love learning about other people and other people's lives. So, different cultures. So
Yeah.
those are always, the types of books that I have been attracted to.
So I wanted there's some things I was looking through your history. I want to know if I was reading this right. Did you go to school in Spain at one point?
Yes,
What led
I
that on?
did.
What put that on?
Oh, I've always loved Spanish. I love learning languages. I've learned about six languages in my life.
Wow.
And one of the nice things about, being in public school is that we started to learn a foreign language pretty young. And I just love Spanish. And then I started to learn that there was a rich Jewish history in Spain.
Hmm.
And I just dreamed about going to Spain for years. Basically, what happened was after college, I was working full time in New York. And, my job ended at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. And I had the whole evening free. And I started taking classes at this special institute for Spanish studies just for fun. And eventually they offered grants to study in Spain for the summer. So I was very lucky. I went to my boss. I was working at actually the Israeli consulate at the time.
I want to ask about that too.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that's a whole other story. But I went to my boss and I said, "Look, I have this really great opportunity to go to Spain." And so I took a leave of absence and I went and I spent the summer learning in this tiny little village outside of Madrid. It's called Alcalá de Henares. It's has one of the first universities in Europe from the 1400s,
Wow.
and it's famous. It was the hometown of Cervantes, and I discovered that the Abarbanel also used to live there. So I
Wow.
spent 3 months there.
It's amazing me just liking Spanish to now all of a sudden I'm going to go to another country to study.
Oh, that was always my dream. I
Wow.
studied Russian. I wanted to go to Russia. I studied Hebrew. I came to Israel. I really believe that in order to really know and appreciate and get a good grasp on a language,
Hmm.
you need to really immerse yourself in the culture.
Well, and how was it? How was the experience there?
It was fantastic. It was a bit difficult because again, I'm a religious Jew,
Right.
and they haven't seen a religious Jew in 500 years. So
And the last
literally,
time didn't go so well.
yeah, literally. I mean, I I connected with some of the Jewish community in Madrid. So I spent Shabbat in Madrid most weekends. But when some of the small, village residents and some of the professors in that town, when they found out that I was Jewish, they were shocked. They had never met a Jew before. So it was really interesting.
Wow, no, that's incredible. So everything about a lot, I see a lot of incredible things on your whole resume. I mean, I was looking at your resume, fascinating. You had such a varied career. So you started as a photo archivist at a
Yeah.
Jewish research. So how did you come to that, and what kind of research was this for?
Well, I had a summer internship at the YIVO Institute. It's the YIVO Institute of Jewish Research. They
Hmm.
specialize in the history of Eastern European Jewry, and it's a very, very well respected research institute. It's been around since 1925, and how I wound up there actually shows, I guess, how dedicated I was because and how earnest I was in order to find an internship. Because basically, at the time, this is going back to the 1990s, and I knew that I wanted to work in a Jewish organization for the summer. I had a dream of, having an internship.
Okay.
And I literally went through the white pages And I contacted every Jewish organization I saw, and you could tell how motivated I was because Yivo starts with Y.
Okay. Yes.
And I wound up staying there for about 2 years. I worked in the photo archives, which was working in a treasure chest. I mean, I got to see photos and books that really, I mean, the original photographs from, the early 1900s, and rare
Wow.
Jewish books that were from the 16 and 1700s.
Oh, amazing.
And I learned so much there. It was just fascinating.
So let's go back. So you said that you worked for the consulate. That intrigued me looking at that. So you were an assistant to the chief of staff, right, in Israel, New
Yes.
York. So how did that come about? So that's incredible for me.
Uh, what happened was so I came to seminary,
Where'd you go to
for my
seminary, by
gap
the way?
year.
You
I
were
went
in
to
Jerusalem?
Midrashat Harova. Yeah, I went to Midrashat Harova in the Old City,
Okay.
and I loved it. Loved it.
Were your parents okay with
And
you going to set? Were your parents okay? Because that's what my daughters both did now. So it's like, were they okay with it? You're just going away for the year for that?
my parents, thank God, were always very supportive
Hmm.
of my adventures and my wanderlust. And yeah, they were okay with it. So they agreed to send me, and then I came, but the condition was that I would come back to the States for college.
Okay.
So I came back, I went to Queens College, and throughout my entire college education, my heart was set on getting back to Israel. And I took very concrete steps to come back to Israel. Every vacation I had, I always tried to get back to Israel. And then I had the
Well,
second best thing happen. I got my first full-time job at the Israeli consulate in New York.
but what were your responsibilities there?
Well, I was working in the office of the consul general, and I was the assistant to the chief of staff. So basically, I mean, the consul general is kind of the figurehead who hosts any dignitaries who come in, any visiting dignitaries from Israel. He's the the regional representative of Israel in the whole New York area. So, meaning there's a consulate, and then there's an embassy, and not many people know the differences. So, an embassy is country to country,
Hmm.
and it's usually in the capital city. And a consulate is region. It's the regional representative of a country. So the New York consulate was responsible for the metro area, and we ran a lot of VIP events with diplomats who came in, Israeli dignitaries. If there were any, let's say, executive directors of large Israeli organizations who wanted to kind of rub shoulders and make connections with
Okay.
influential New Yorkers. So the consul general would host events, and then I would help organize those events.
It's not necessarily just a fundraising thing, right? It's just to, I guess, make connections. Is that really more?
For the visiting, you mean for the visiting
Right.
organizations? It's to make connections. It's to, build up prestige and credibility, and try to. Everyone has their plan and their agenda, so they're coming to get through the gateways and meet influential people.
Oh, all right. Now going back, you said you wanted to move to Israel. So just what prompted was that just from the seminary? You had such a good time that you wanted to move there for good?
This was a combination of I've always loved Hebrew, and like I said, I've always been
It's
very
amazing to me with you
proud.
that just loving a language, I have to go live in that country. This is in Spain and in Israel.
Yeah, yeah. um, this is why I've traveled to so many different places, because I've just always wanted to see the world and experience lots of things. So with Israel in particular, we came here as a
You went as your
family.
family? Your whole family moved?
Uh, well, I came here
Okay,
as a single person, a few years after I graduated college.
fine.
And then my brother followed me, and he went to the army. He volunteered in the army. And during that time, my parents became very pro-Israel, Zionist,
Right.
and they started visiting more often. And fast forward about 8 years, and they wound up coming too. And now most of us are here. I still have a sister who's in the States. So, but
She
yeah,
won't make the move.
she was here for a while, but they decided to move back.
Okay.
So,
I lived there in Israel as a kid too. I lived there for a couple of years. So
where were you?
we were in Jerusalem also in Gila, and my father had always wanted to make Aliyah as well, and but eventually we moved back as well.
And
But
what year was that?
it was 79 to 81.
Wow.
So we were in Merkaz
It must have
Klita,
been a
absorption.
different planet back
Oh,
then.
for sure. The place that I lived was, I think, eventually became at first college dorms, and I think now I don't know what it is now. I think it's like low income housing or something like that. I'm not sure what it is. It's not what it was anymore when I was there. So, but I used of course the Google Earth to look up and everything to see pictures of it. And so how did you start getting into PR?
Let's see. At a certain point, I started working for a small English magazine here. It
Hmm.
no longer exists. But I started working, with different other PR agencies, and advertisers, different companies. I was interviewing people. I was writing articles, and that kind of evolved. And eventually, I started working for a big publisher here, a publishing company called
Hmm.
Koren. And I was the marketing director there for about 10 years.
That's not what you
Um,
studied in school, right? So you just got kind of fell into this accidentally almost.
yeah, it was an evolution. You'll meet a lot of people in Israel that they start off in one place and then they kind of evolve into something else. But basically, I mean, over the course of a few years, I started off in one job, and then I moved to another and another, and I started to realize I really, really enjoy communications. I
Yeah.
enjoy, especially now that there's all this different technology and tools available. So I really enjoyed being able to help other people clarify their message and then communicate that with the world. It's something that I'm passionate about. I'm pretty good at it. I'm very good at. I enjoy networking, and I'm good at it. I enjoy meeting new people, and so all of this kind of connected into a career in PR, which is what I've been doing for about
Right. So
15 years now.
you're working in a PR agency for a while, and so you start your own agency. So walk me through the process. And so you were doing things for other companies. Were there some nerve to come along with like saying, "Hey, now I'm going to branch out on my own and start my own place"? What was the thought process that I'm going to start doing this on my own? Because that's not what you studied in school. Oh,
Right.
and now it's your career, and now you're going to make your own agency. I just say, have to feel it's a little bit nerve wracking in there too. But so walk me through that a little bit.
It is, and it's complex, and it definitely takes a lot of courage. But keep in mind that when we talk about this, when I talk about this evolution,
Right.
this is um, this is an evolution that took place over, I'm talking 10 or 15 years. Um, I've been in Israel for 20 years now.
Okay.
So, when I first started working at that magazine, I was good at writing and I was good at editing, and they
Sure.
needed somebody. And I think, I was working for for pennies, but that was more than 15 years ago. So between then and now, a lot has happened. And luckily, I really have been lucky. I've had pretty nice jobs, opportunities, professional opportunities where I've advanced my skills, and I think this is all important for anyone who wants
Hmm.
to, not just for people in Israel, but in general. Like, I really do believe that you learn something from everyone. Uh, Sometimes it's what to do, and sometimes it's what not to do. And luckily, throughout this time, especially during the time that I was working at the publishing company, I learned a tremendous amount, and I wound up meeting a lot of people, a lot of people who I'm still connected with.
Hmm.
And luckily, there are many opportunities, both online and, networking events where you're learning, you're putting the pieces together. The world in media has changed so much, even over the course of time that I've been in this industry.
Right.
So you just always have to be on your toes, which is something that I love because it makes it dynamic. There's always something to learn. So the decision to go out on my own basically came about. It was something that I was thinking about for a while. I'd always kind of dreamed about it, and the opportunity presented itself. And to be honest, I mean, thank God, I'm a mother now. I have three little kids, and I always believed in the importance of working and, having a job. And I don't think I'm the type of person to be able to stay with my kids all day long. I give a lot of credit to those parents who are able to do it, but I'm not that person.
Mhm.
And so I needed to have something that would give me flexibility. And I decided, okay, this is the right time. And I was very scared to do it. Really, I was so hesitant.
Sure.
But there were a couple of people in particular who were extremely encouraging, and they really gave me the push to take that leap. And fortunately, there are a number of people and organizations, especially here in Israel, that are specifically there to help Anglos and really anyone who wants to launch a small business. There's a lot of support here for that.
Is there? Okay.
So I wound up connecting with some people who kind of mentored me and helped me establish the foundation. And thank God it's been going well.
Right. So you're listed as a boutique agency. But I see a lot of places online that say we're a boutique. So what does that mean exactly? We're a boutique agency, and how does that differ from, I guess, a bigger place?
Well, I guess, if you want to think about it in terms of, what's a boutique store? How does
Mhm.
when you envision a boutique store, how does that differ from like walking into Macy's or Target? Like you get personalized attention. The salesperson comes over to you and approaches you and says like, how can I help you? And they're kind of accompanying you throughout your whole, in this analogy, shopping process, right? So, I mean, I kind of take that same approach. I don't have a huge team that I work
Right.
with. I do, outsource, and I collaborate with various experts depending on what the scope of the project is. But I really uh, focus, and I focus on each client that I have and each project that I have very closely. I make sure to give them, personal attention, and I create unique plans for each project. It's not something that's cookie cutter. So when I say a boutique agency, it means that something is, personalized attention, custom, tailor made, and where I'm accompanying them throughout the whole process.
So yeah, so your book marketing as well, your book marketing agency. So what that's some of the things that entails. So what are some of the things that you have to do as your responsibilities as a book marketer?
Well, it depends on the client, but for the most part, usually authors come to me before their book is published.
Hmm.
Um, they're usually in the final stages of publishing their book, whether they're self-published or they're working with a publisher, and they want to get the word out about their book, but they don't really know how.
Sure.
So, and they also don't know
That
what's,
should be like every author. That doesn't, yeah.
sorry.
That should be like every author almost. Don't know
Yeah,
what to
yeah.
write.
And it's interesting because even for authors who are working with traditional publishers, the publisher might have a PR or a marketing team, but they usually offer very, limited services, or
Correct. Yes.
they have
Yeah.
like a certain template that they work with. They have a newsletter, they do their ads in a catalog, and it kind of ends there. So the work that I do is basically, first I talk with the client and I get to know, I get to know what their goal is. Some authors, they publish their book just to have their book out there, and it's to establish some kind of credibility or expertise in a certain field.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily focused on sales, right? So that approach is different than for somebody who's, more focused on sales. But the stuff that I do is I talk to them about what their key messages are, who their who their targeted readers are, and then I work with them to figure out how to reach those readers through the media, whether it's through interviews or podcasts or blog posts, or social media posts. Um, Sometimes it's about going on speaking engagements or going to certain conferences. So, depending on what they're looking to do and what the genre is and what the theme of their book is, I'm helping them figure out what steps they need to take in order to get their book out there to the audience that they're aiming for.
Well, yeah, I'm a former literary agent, so I always advise people same thing, that do not rely on the publishing houses for PR alone, because
Yeah.
you're going to be very disappointed for one. I'm a published author also, so it's the same thing. I say, don't rely on them because, and I always use this one quote. It's the publishing houses put the most resources into the authors who need it least.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
The biggest names get the most publicity. So you need to start looking out for yourself and start doing, taking your own steps to make sure that your book is a success.
Yeah, and that's challenging because it's as it's a lot of work. It's a lot of moving parts, and not everyone has the time or the know-how or the resources to do that. So oftentimes, authors will come to me to kind of supplement what their publishers are offering. And
Mhm.
that's really uh it's a good place to be because they're covering certain grounds and then I could come in and supplement it. And I'm
Right.
very, I try to, work in a collaborative way. So that's really good. And then you have self-published authors, and that's a whole other,
Oh,
it's a whole other world, but there's so many opportunities now these days for self-published authors. And it's like, there's so many opportunities. So it could be kind of confusing. Like, where do I start? What do I do? How much money do I need? So these are all things that I try to, figure out with the author. Um, and, we put the pieces together, and it takes time and it takes a lot of effort, but we're doing it. I actually brought a couple of examples to show you. Um, this is one book that I worked on. I don't know if it's coming out clearly, but it's called
you live right there,
Shylock's Venice.
Shylock's Venice. Okay.
Yeah, so
I was
this is
looking on your site. That looked very interesting to me, that one.
it's excellent, and that's working with Bloomsbury, which is a top publisher,
Hmm.
but they don't necessarily know the Jewish world. So it just works great. And then this is the latest one, which is
Oh, can't see that
uh
one still. Yeah, what?
here.
Uh,
Oh
no,
no.
still can't see it. It's still boring. The Heroes of October 7th, right? Okay.
Yeah. And that's a book of it's a collection of short stories for children about October 7th.
So you
Um,
work from Israel, and I know we live in an electronic age, now. But are there some challenges to being in another country and staying I guess, in tune with the publishing industry here?
there are a couple of challenges. They're not insurmountable. You just have to be flexible. One is just a matter of time difference. A lot of times it means I work late at night
Right.
just to
Right.
make sure that, I could reach the people, especially for working on the West Coast. That's tough.
Wow. Yes.
Um, and the other thing is, there's really something special and powerful about face to face.
Yeah.
And I definitely see that. I try to go in once a year, once every couple of years, and I see the difference. Once you're able to go in, even if you're just popping into somebody for a quick meeting, a quick, uh, there's nothing better than being able to meet
Oh,
people in person.
I agree. Well, also, and you know what, and even this now, because of this age now, Zoom is so much better than just a phone call. Also, you get to see, expressions. But yes, I agree that it is good to have that personal contact as well. So you have a lot of Israeli clients, and so there's been so much written and discussed about how Jewish authors have been treated in publishing, post October 7th, and really, actually, even before that, but especially after post October 7th. So, have you encountered anything like that, either overtly or more discreetly, where there's just been some resistance to featuring, Israeli authors that you handle?
I have not experienced that with my clients,
Mm,
but I have been reading many accounts
right,
of Jewish authors, not Israelis, any
right.
Jewish authors,
True.
whether
Yes.
they, regardless of where they live. I belong to all these different groups online, and there have been
Mhm.
so many people who have been blacklisted, or their events have been canceled, or, the writers who submit pieces to certain publications and they're getting rejected simply because they're Jewish. So luckily I have not encountered that, but I definitely have been hearing about it more and more.
So I saw that several of your authors have written October 7th books, and you just showed me one also as well. How did October 7th affect you personally at that time?
Um, you said that you lived in New York for
Right,
many years, right?
right. Mhm.
Did you live in New York when 9/11 happened?
I had just moved to Florida at that point. I was here several months. I remember exactly where I was when it happened there too, but I was like, it was just surreal to me because I really, it was just only a matter of months
Yeah.
that I had moved to Florida. But yeah, it affects you if you're from New York a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the comparison that I have. And I actually like kept thinking back to that time over 9/11 because I had a similar reaction of just feeling this sick, dark feeling in the pit of my stomach. How has it affected me? I feel like I am amongst the fortunate ones because everyone in my family who lives in my house has been in my house all year
Mhm.
long. And that's a rarity here because look, luckily I live right outside of Jerusalem, and it's been fairly quiet here. We've had a few sirens
Right.
lately, but for a while it was a ghost town. There were no men around,
I heard someone
who were
else say that.
between,
Someone else I interviewed said the same thing. Yeah.
and the men who were around, either they were much older or they were too young to serve, and then occasionally we would see the men come back, and they would come back to pick up their kids from school or pick up their kids from kindergarten, and they're in their full uniforms with an M16 around them,
Hmm.
and that's our life, you know. Now I feel like it's been very challenging for me. I'll just, put it out there to, I mean, it has been so miserable and somber and really just so sad this whole year. It's just been an emotional roller coaster. And to be a parent who has to still, function and put on a
Right.
good face while you're also protecting your kids from hearing about
Yeah.
the brutality of what happened, it's been exhausting. And we have neighbors, we have a neighbor who lives across the street, a family who lives across the street from us, and a family who lives in back of us. Both of them lost their sons
Oh, no.
this past year.
Sorry.
And it's been a really dark, dark time. Everybody here knows somebody who is
Right.
directly affected, whether they were murdered or taken hostage, or they're serving in battle, or they fell in battle. Every single person knows some. So it's been very hard. I mean, that's
Yeah.
an understatement.
You mentioned 9/11. It's exactly those 2 days are days that I'll never forget where I was when I heard the news or saw the news. Both. I remember exactly what I was doing when I first saw the news about Israel and on 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, and I saw this in New York after 9/11 too. I remember after 9/11 that I felt like for a while it changed New Yorkers. People were softer.
Yeah.
You would walk down the street and I remember seeing, there are like pubs and bars, and they would have these placards, like, blackboards outside with messages to get people to come in.
Right.
And there were these nice messages of like, come in, be with us, or and so that's like a little bit of what's happening here. What's happening here is really magnified. The amount of chesed, the amount of volunteer activities and generosity, and people really taking care of each other. For any family in our community, if there's a family, they're called mishpachot megoyasot, like any family who has a father who's serving serving in battle. So they're taken care of in terms of meals.
That's great.
There's babysitting, there's activities for the kids, the amount of generosity. And this really does show, I think, a lot about the Israeli people, about the Jewish people, that we come together in crisis.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I agree. I think very much. All right, so let's get back to book things. So without giving too much away, so what advice would you give to authors looking to break out a little bit, without just, something basic right now, so they still know that they can entice you to go hire you for your services, but what basic advice would you give to authors?
That's a good question. So my basic advice would be to sit down and come up with a list of, I would say, 20 to 30 people who you feel you could turn to help you connect and get the word out about your book. I think working with this, I work with people on building up their close network. So think about who are the people in your closest network, whether they're relatives or people in your community or colleagues, or people who, if they're experts in your field that you might follow their podcast or follow their blog, try to come up with an actual list of people who you can turn to and connect with, that you could turn to them and say, I'm coming out with this new book and I would really love to hear your thoughts on it. Can I send you a review copy? And you want to get them to look at the book, either give their reviews or post about it on social media, or, if they're willing to write about it, then that's great. But, it can be very daunting to like think big and think about a whole media plan, but everybody has hopefully they have a close network of people that they could turn to. And that's something that I feel like everyone can do. The reason why I say 20 to 30 people is because maybe a third of them will actually do it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes, that's extremely true. I was also part of a group. I mean, debut authors when my book came out, and the whole premise of it was, we're all going to leave each other reviews throughout. Whenever your book comes out this year, we're all going to jump on and leave each other a whole bunch of reviews. And I found that the authors who were published at the beginning of the year didn't necessarily reciprocate to the authors who were published at the end of the year. So you do have to do a lot of things on your own. You have to be cognizant. That's very good advice. So what are some projects that you have coming up that you're really excited about?
Well, right now I'm working on this, the Heroes of October 7th, and we're doing a big push. We're going to do a big push also to working towards Hanukkah. And then there's another book that I'm going to start to work on. It's actually a really amazing, beautiful new Torah commentary that mixes in mysticism and Chassidut. I'm not going to give too many details about it, but it is a project that I'm very excited about. And in general, I just see that there's so much creativity and there are so many books coming out, and it's very exciting to see.
So how can people follow you and Singer Publicity on social media?
Well, I'm on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and Instagram, and you could check me out at Singer Publicity. That's my handle. And the website is www.singerpublicity.com.
Yehudit, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a lot of fun. I got to speak to you once before, and I enjoy speaking to you. So
yeah, it was great talking with you too. Thank you for having me.
Well, again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and again, a very special thanks to Yehudit Singer-Freud. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.